With Michael Bloomberg making some serious moves in the polls here as he continues to spend an egregious amount of money, depending on who you ask. The 2020 presidential hopeful has reportedly spent more than $250 million on campaign advertising since joining the race. That's according to data from Advertising Analytics. But guys, I mean, he's seeing that payout in the polls here as he continues to move up, polling about, what is it, I think fourth or fifth behind Warren and Yang in the latest Emerson poll nationally. So, I mean, he's spending a lot of money, but it's clearly paying off here.
It is. I mean, I've talked about this before. It usually does happen when we see not just presidential races, but, congressional ones, gubernatorial races. The candidate that spends the most wins. And Mike Bloomberg entered this race pretty late. He's actually already ignoring some of the early voting states like Iowa, which is coming up on the 3rd. And he's putting all his money behind some of those later races, California, New York. And look, his strategy is actually working. I mean, he is spending a ton of money on commercials, on Facebook ads, on radio ads, and he's outspending. If you watch the NFL,
he is on every single ad.
Exactly.
The playoffs were all Bloomberg all the time.
So here's the thing. President Trump himself, his campaign came out and said that he wants to spend $1 billion in order, and he's an incumbent, and incumbents have a pretty good shot of winning. I know you, Emily, had written about this recently. Presidents tend to be reelected, which means I think Mike Bloomberg's strategy is, okay, I have to outspend the president. And with nearly $60 billion, he absolutely has the money to do that because he is completely self-funded right now. So, I mean, the fact that he's able to jump in the polls that much without doing massive rallies and town halls that we've seen all the other candidates doing just by spending money on commercials, essentially, is pretty incredible.
And not even be in the debates so far.
Exactly. And to not even be in the debates, I think, is a huge part of it. So, I mean, is it really, to your point then, about visibility then, even more so than getting across the ideological tenets of your campaign? Because I don't know that advertisements are the best way to actually get that across.
So Michael Bloomberg has an advantage in the sense that his political ideology is actually already pretty well known, first from his time here in New York City, but then also just he's done a ton of interviews, ever since he was the mayor, so people, I think, already kind of know politically where he lies on the spectrum. But I think right now, when the candidate pool is so large, visibility first and foremost is important. There might be some candidates that not a lot of people know about that they actually might agree with their policies or with their campaign proposals. But if you don't know them, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, which is why I think you were surprised, Angelique, to see Andrew Yang there sitting in fourth off that latest poll, because he's one of those names that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and nor does he have as much money as Bloomberg, but he's still sitting there.
He's still sitting there. He also is somewhat of a quirky candidate that doesn't have that sort of household politician characteristic, that likability factor. He talks over people's heads sometimes, I certainly think. How much do you think Bloomberg's announcement, though, that even if he doesn't win the nomination on the Democratic side, he's going to turn over basically his machine and his money to support that Democratic? Because I know certainly anecdotally, people really responded well to that he's not only going to use his money to support him, but really to prop up the Democratic side of the ticket. And it seemed like that eased people into how much money he was spending.
Right. And to the point that he hasn't been on the debate stage, he hasn't torn down really any of the other candidates. We've seen Bloomberg use his money before to really throw it behind Democratic candidates. We saw him do it in the midterm elections. So I actually do believe that if he feels very strongly that, listen, I have to put as much money behind into defeating President Trump as possible, either by myself winning, I can imagine he will, if he's willing to outspend $1 billion or spend $1 billion just to defeat President Trump for his own campaign, you have to imagine that he is absolutely willing to spend a couple $100 million to support whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and right now, I think it's fair to say that it's anybody's race heading into the Iowa caucuses because...
Well, that's not true.
Well, I still think you got...
It's not Tulsi Gabbard's race, for example. It's not anyone's race.
All right, maybe not anyone's race, but the names that we showed on that last poll, we cut it off at 4%. Those names I would call anyone. But Kristin Myers, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hey, investors, Zack Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.